A very good evening and welcome this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mongushampagi. Let me begin by announcing that initially we intended to have a different discussion. We expected to be joined by the man who's taken the national resistance movement and President Museveni to court, arguing that or making the claim that President Museveni, if he runs as a sole candidate in 2016, he will reach the age limit of 75 before when he's still in office, and Benjamin Alipanga thinks that would be a breach of the constitution and needed a lot of interpretation. Would have been an interesting discussion, but we're unable to have that discussion tonight because Museveni has decided to reshuffle his cabinet, bringing in few new faces but surprising ones. The bouncing back of Jim Muhwezi, who will be in charge of us, Fourth Estate members, as Minister of Information and National Guidance. He's also made a drop of two senior cabinet ministers, that is the Attorney General, Peter Nyombi, and the Minister of Finance, Maria Chiwanuka. She didn't hold a political constituency. She was seen as a kind of technocrat in that ministry, and now she's been dropped and made a presidential advisor. But what does it mean when you see people like Evelyn Anite graduating to cabinet? When you see the people who were feuding the other day, James Biandala and Frank Tumwebaze, having sit in the same office, with Frank Tumwebaze retaining his position as Minister for the Presidency, and Abraham Biandala being sent to the office of the President as Minister without portfolio. Does Minister without portfolio, does he sit at the Prime Minister's office or the Minister for the Presidency?
Prime Minister's office.
Prime Minister's office.
The Twin Towers.
Both of them, because one tower is for the Prime Minister, one tower is for the Presidency.
He sits at the Minister for Presidency.
Minister for the Presidency.
So he will be directly a neighbor to Frank Tumwebaze in the office.
No, I did speak to Frank earlier today, and he said, we are friends, we'll work together. We'll be working in the same office and we'll work together. No major problems. And of course,
but for him to work, Frank has to delegate him something.
Mary Karoro Krut, Mary Karoro Krut, Minister for Security. It's a long journey she's traveled in cabinet. And very many people will be asking and saying, does she fit the docket? I think she does. That's my opinion. Let me introduce my colleagues in the studio tonight. Of course, Chris Obore has already been speaking. So Chris Obore, very nice to have you once again.
Thank you, Charles.
And we have Nicholas Opio. He's an advocate and works with Chapter 4. Nick, always a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you very much, Charles. Thanks for inviting me. I am glad to join the panel today to discuss the reshuffle. I was joking before coming into the studio here that I was hoping that maybe Chris and would be appointed a minister. Because see, the only way to join government in Uganda is to be a very strong critic. And if you're a strong critic, they will look you up and say, but you know, what do you want?
It doesn't actually look like that.
But in this
Chris,
reshuffle, I don't see
if you look at this reshuffle, there are no critics joining.
That's exactly what I was trying to tell Nick. This reshuffle is a reward reshuffle, and it is a war reshuffle. When you see Anita coming in, her coming is so significant, not because that she's going to change any dynamics in cabinet. It is a message to the young people, young NRM cadres, that there is gain in working hard for Muse. Just like Anita did it, and she's now in cabinet. You can do it in your small way, and you'll be somewhere. So that's the message being sent to the young people.
Let's look at the whole ensemble of the new cabinet, what Chris is calling the war cabinet. They're critical names. People have been in the trenches over this sole candidature project. Jim Muhwezi obviously has been in the trenches. Dr. Chris Baryomunsi navigated his way from being a rebel MP from the time he authored that document, together with Frank Tumwebaze, with Margaret Muhanga, and with David Bahati. You remember that document they authored as a new group of members of parliament? They actually started defining the new dynamics within that parliament that brought in people like Henry Banyanzachi to make them rebel MPs. And then, so you have David Bahati. He's been in the trenches and working very hard. Very many cabinet lists Bahati has been missing, and people were saying, how did Bahati miss? Will he be on the next one? Now, finally, he is Minister for Planning. I also did speak to him earlier today, and he was excited about his job, and he said, we'll be working together to plan for this country. What do you make of this assemble? Jim Muhwezi, David Bahati, Dr. Chris Baryomunsi, you retained Banyanzachi, you have Trace Bushanaandi being retained in agriculture, you have, yes, you have Philemon Mateke, a former congressman, all of them from the Chigezi sub-region joining the Prime Minister. What do you make of this, Nick?
Well, the honest truth is then you have the fear of the former Prime Minister looming large over this cabinet reshuffle. All the names of the people you've mentioned, nearly half, if not more, of them were people who are perceived to be leaning towards the leaning towards the Museveni side in the Museveni and Mbabazi fight. Just because there are people like Chris, people like David Bahati, in fact the entire group in that area who are seen to be opposing the Mbabazi group, have been appointed to cabinet. And you have people like Jim Muhwezi. Jim was the head of security at the Nambole NRM
accreditation.
Retreat. So he was in charge. In fact, the accusation is that he was the one who locked out all the Mbabazi people. He planted soldiers and intelligence people to shut down anybody who was perceived to have any ambition of speaking for Mbabazi at the conference. So you have a reward cabinet, but a cabinet that is largely informed by President Museveni's fear, or really the perceived fear of Amama Mbabazi.
Chris, yes, I earlier when we had a discussion in the afternoon about this same cabinet reshuffle with Solomon Serwanja in this same studio, you were arguing about, you're raising the analysis about this being the reward cabinet, and especially the dynamic it plays on the politics of Kigezi sub-region.
Basically, this, I said in that quarter, first of all, cabinet reshuffle is like PLOE results, A-level results. They are released the first day, then it goes. It doesn't solve the problem of unemployment. After this AA, 444, and then what?
20,
there's nothing.
19, 18.
But somehow parents get excited that the children have gone through the school system. That's what we are doing. We're excited that the new cabinet reshuffle. But so what? It is not going to do much. But politically speaking, I said this is one of the most intelligently crafted reshuffles, given the political circumstances. That Amama Mbabazi is also assembling his own war team. So this one weakens Mbabazi's group without vanquishing them, and therefore denies them the opportunity to say the reshuffle was a witch hunt. Because when you see Biandala, who was clearly known publicly as a Mbabazi person, Chiinji, who was seen to be a Mbabazi person, and when he went on Facebook to express his soul, they have still been maintained in the cabinet, albeit in a weaker position. When Pierre Gambi, who is clearly a Museveni staunch man, is the head of Ministry of Works, there is little a state Minister of Works will do. Biandala, of course, is going to take instructions from Frank Mbabazi, whom he has been publicly fighting, because he's going to sit next to him. So you cannot come now and say the president has purged Mbabazi what? People. There is no room for that. And yet at the same time, he has weakened them by keeping them getting state parks without necessarily having any power. And yet the Museveni has been able to reward those who worked against
to deliver the sole
candidature. So Anita is the minister. You see, Jim, with the all intents and purposes, worked hard in Nambole.
I've been reading, Chris, I was reading through
Bahati has been on the ground.
Chris, I was reading through the affidavit sworn in support of Benjamin Alipanga's petition, sworn by Hope Mwesigye, and talks about how people were locked out of the Nambole process. And
who locked them out? That is Jim.
But for
they say they even brought what are they called?
Crime preventers.
Crime preventers.
She raises, she says they brought in crime preventers, they brought in DISOs, they brought in RDCs, they brought in GISOs, and all these people
intimidating. Even the sitting arrangement in Nambolo was such a fact that those who believed in Mbabazi were taken to a peripheral area where their hands couldn't be seen. If they had to say anything. So you have to trust the Jim and his group for what they did. But so the president has rewarded them without making them disillusioned that we work hard and we are not being rewarded. But Chris, I think you have done well.
Chris, if you look at Jim, many people whom I spoke to earlier today, in the afternoon after the cabinet reshuffle was made available, they said during the Nambole process, which was only December last year, that he actually came off as a very articulate person, especially engaging with debates. We had him seated here. He was seated next to you, debating on this very show. And people said he came off as a person who knew and someone who can manage the media. Now, an election year media is a complicated cup of tea to deal with. With Jim Muhwezi, you think he will be able to, how does he deal with the media that is already precarious today, especially going into an election year? I mean, especially in an election year, that you have a Jim Muhwezi, a former head of security, a former minister of health. He has one or two things that he knows with the media. How do you think the media will fare?
I think, first of all, Jim Muhwezi has had his share of troubles in this country, having been one of those who have been censored. And Jim Muhwezi is also one man who has largely been misunderstood in this country. When the time was being censored, I think Jim Muhwezi carried himself in a way that he was not understood. And it was easy to throw anything at him, and it was easy to believe. But when you look at him over time, Jim Muhwezi is coming out to be a different person from whom people used to see. In fact, even his censor largely comes from a position he took to do with the international health mafia, who wanted to impose.
Was that the censure or the trial of Global
the trial
Fund?
of a Global Fund,
Gavi,
yes.
Gavi.
That's the trial of a Global Fund
Gavi.
was basically because he stood firm in the defense of African countries when these pharmaceuticals want to impose high prices on HIV, AIDS, malaria drugs. He led African Council of Ministers to say no, and these fellows called the people in America and had a way to finish him. But of course, that information was not given to the public here. So the public has an image of Jim Muhwezi, a very rich man,
a very corrupt
person,
person,
who was unapproachable, because at that time he was an ISO man. You know, he carried himself like out of limelight. But now, if he comes out, and with the political wit now he has, and with the beef he already had with Omar Mbabazi, having thrown him in all that trouble, I think Jim has a good side to him. He's a lawyer now, he has gone to school, he's brilliant. It all depends on how Jim Muhwezi will continue executing his work, because this has been a redemption time for him.
Okay.
People to understand who he is than basing on.
We've been told we need to take a quick break, but on Jim Muhwezi, before we leave, I have interacted with Jim Muhwezi over a long period of time, and what Chris says is very true. He's approachable and he can communicate. He can communicate both above the table, but his experience as one as a policeman, two as an intelligence person, three now as a lawyer. He actually trained as a lawyer in the 1980s. He only went back to LDC to get his practicing certificate because he hadn't had opportunity to complete as he went to the bush. He's a smooth operator. If you wanted to find a word that defines him, he's a smooth operator. But a media that is operating, especially at this time, has to be extremely sensitive, and the person put to deal with that media, you need to look at him very carefully. What kind of leeway does he give? How much push does he give? How much squeezing is he likely to exert?
Well, I think the appointment is not because Jim is very articulate. Of course, he speaks well. But I don't think his appointment is because he's very articulate, he's able to handle the media. I think it is more about his ruthlessness, his ability to actually turn on the main side and being feared
when
within the media when it's required. And I do think that that is the side you're going to see more than the articulate, sober, calm Jim that people know here. There's a mean side to him. So I think that Jim is going to do that exactly for the media, because the biggest problem going forward now is going to be a very open media, a critical media, a media able to give space and platform for all ideas. Now that becomes a problem if you want to hold on to power, and especially when things are going bad. That's how I see Jim playing out in the media. But secondly also, I do think that the appointment of Jim to that office, in many ways, given the background that Chris has given, you know, the allegations of corruption, the allegations of theft, his censure, into a position of national guidance, in many ways brings to question whether we actually think thoroughly about national guidance. Because a person, whether real or perceived to be corrupt, or or is actually corrupt, now being the person offering national guidance, it's really something that I don't see as a good appointment.
We'll of course discuss the political rehabilitation of Jim from the time he was thrown out and has behaved himself. But when we come back, we'll discuss another critical area of cabinet, which is the office of the Attorney General. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we are discussing the reshuffle finally announced by the President Yoweri Museveni. Frank Tumwebaze, a man who was at the center of much of the discussion because he took leave and was supposed to be coming back to office, is retaining his office as Minister for the Presidency. Mary Karolo Krut has come in as Minister for Security, actually doing a switch with Wilson Muruli Mukasa, who goes to Gender, Labour and Social Development. Mwesigwa Rukutana, after years of working behind the scenes on legal matters, because I think Mwesigwa Rukutana with Adolf Mwesige and Fred Ruhindi, who's now taken over as the full cabinet minister for, as the full cabinet position for Attorney General, as the full Attorney General rather, is a team that has been working behind the scenes. Let's start with the departure of Nyombi Tembo. And Chris, let me start with Nicholas, because Nicholas was secretary to the Uganda Law Society. Uganda Law Society. when you withdrew confidence in him and as suspended him. Are you surprised about this change?
No, I'm not surprised. In fact, I'm very elated, to say the least, because for all intent and purposes, Nyombi's tenure in that office has been problematic to nearly everybody, not just lawyers, because you see, even the discussion amongst the lawyers at the time was not a discussion of whether one group had confidence or one group had no confidence in Nyombi. Everybody seemed to have agreed at the time that there was a problem. The difference was how to deal with it. While a bigger section thought that it should have been suspended, some section thought that it should have been handled differently. So everybody agreed that there was a problem.
You actually wanted him fired from that position. You thought he was incompetent to be holding the office of the Attorney General of this country.
Yes, I still think so. Because you see, look at his tenure in office. Nyombi never appeared in court even once to defend the government of Uganda. Even Mama Mbabazi, when he was Attorney General, he appeared in court. In fact, he appeared in the Supreme Court to defend government. Nyombi never appeared in court. Most of his advice was being challenged left and right by his colleagues.
Kidu never appeared in court, did he?
I'm not aware about Kidu, but I'm comparing Nyombi and Mama Mbabazi. Mbabazi appeared in court and argued at the Supreme Court, the referendum case, if you remember. So in that sense, Nyombi's tenure has been problematic. In fact, Nyombi is the one single individual who is responsible for the sorry state of our judiciary. The fact that we have no Chief Justice is down to Nyombi's insistence on what was a wrong legal position. Now we know it's a wrong one because the court have agreed with us. Nyombi is the single most responsible person for the mess in the judiciary, for the lack of a Chief Justice, for the lack of a Deputy Chief Justice, for the legal continuance in office as acting Deputy Chief Justice of Stephen Kavuma is solely the responsibility of Nyombi. So now that he's gone, I think that we have a new page to resolve that problem.
You think some senator will return to
bring integrity to that office, because for all intent and purposes, everybody else didn't have trust in that office. The IGG was fighting Nyombi, the Speaker of Parliament was fighting Nyombi. Everybody didn't want to be advised or to be represented by Nyombi.
They didn't have faith in his
They never had faith. Even officers who work in the Attorney General's chambers, those are our colleagues, people we speak to, didn't have confidence in him as Attorney General. So I think that his dropping from cabinet is both a relief for him, but more importantly, a relief for those of us who think that he was a problem in that office. I hope that then Fred Ruhindi, who is a sober head, is more of a sober head. I think he listens more. He likes to appeal to reasons. But by even himself, they have agreed before the president with his boss. So I think that his ascendance to the office of the AG will bring sanity and resolve the problem we have in the judiciary, but also more importantly, ensure that all government departments have trust in that office.
Chris, yes. The politics of the Peter Nyombi appointment, because when he dropped in that office, people had been expecting at that time that Adolf Mwesige actually would be elevated because he was doing a lot of the work of together with Fred Ruhindi. One, people were waiting for Ruhindi's elevation to the full office, but two, they were expecting maybe Adolf Mwesige might take over that position, and there was speculation about other people coming into that office. Now, Nyombi has been dropped. He's a Muganda. Maria Chiwanuka has been dropped. She's a Muganda. Abraham Biandala has literally has taken a much weaker position. Do you think that plays within the political dynamics of the Buganda politics, even when you retain Edward Chiwanuka II as vice president?
Yeah, on the Peter Nyombi, I beg that I don't discuss him because the information I've gotten is that his health is not good. And I don't want to discuss somebody who is on a sick bed or is facing health problems. It's just my African nature. I don't want to discuss about him. If he was healthy, I would have a lot to say about him, his performance. But no, one way or the other, each of us will be in a sick bed one day. So I tend to associate with people in that kind of situation. Let me discuss the appointment of Ruhindi and the implications, maybe the dropping of Buganda. Ruhindi is more of a technical man than a politician.
He's a good politician,
yes, I know. I don't know him too much to claim anything, but seeing from where he's been doing his work, I think he respects his professional life, even when he plays his politics. And I hope that his elevation now, he should not betray the trust of those who think he's a good man. And the most important thing he should address is the appointment of a Chief Justice. And I hope that he will still consider Justice Katurebe for Chief Justice, because he seems to be competent and is a senior person in the bench. And I hope Ruhindi will respect seniority in the judiciary and stop this picking. Let the president pick funny people for RDC, for whatever, minister, whatever, but don't pick funny people for judiciary. Because if you want to see democracy, if you want to see good governance, that's an area where you must pay attention to.
Hope he doesn't appoint Nyombi as the Chief Justice.
You don't just drop things there. So I suspect that Nyombi would not have been dropped. Maybe could have been changed the portfolio. But maybe partly they could have agreed because of he's not feeling well, that he needs to be home. Because there are many here who think we're going to be dropped. They are not dropped. So there could be another reason for Nyombi's not being there other than the politics. Now, when we talk about Kiwanuka being dropped, I told you when we were discussing with Solomon Serwanja that the only missing thing in finance is the good English of Maria Kiwanuka. You know, since the time of Mayanja and Kanji, we never had a finance minister who could make a budget, have some good echoes, and how do you call that in English? Sound effect, you feel sleep doesn't come easily because she would coin World Bank and American English. But in terms of political substance, her coming to finance was because of closeness to Nabagareka.
Just that?
Yes, and remember,
the investors forum as well.
And remember, even her coming on board was the relations between central government and Buganda were frosty. And the president to work hard to warm to the Buganda. As we speak today, do you see any bad relations between Buganda and
so the problem is dealt with?
So I think the problem is dealt with, and Kiwanuka in finance ministry, the finance ministry is run by technical people there. That's what they must know. The people there, if you are talking about the economy of this country, talk about Lawrence Kiza. He's a very quiet man, a gentleman in his own way. Which I love my man from Teso there, the only person we have there. Though sometimes we even propose working quietly. He's there, but very technical man. Very, very technical. And Keith, is there. Keith is more powerful than a minister. If you didn't know,
he has been for many years.
In terms of relevance to the president. So if you don't work with that group there, you have to think twice if you're a political appointee. You have to think twice. And that group is the Museveni cadreship.
Let me drop in a quick question there. If you have Matia Kasaija replacing, you've seen one of Maria Kiwanuka's biggest fights in that ministry was her positions on NSSF. Now, NSSF is a low-hanging fruit, ripe for harvest. You have Yarugawa has gone back there. You have Matia Kasaija coming in here, coming from that political background from the national resistance movement, the movement system of governments.
I get what you're saying.
Where he was
Kiwanuka came from the comfort of Washington. Matia Kasaija has been in the bush. Matia Kasaija understands the person he's serving. Matia Kasaija understands the movement, the ideology, and the philosophy, and the commander of that philosophy. So he's not going to fight a senseless war. He's able to draw a border. What is the interest of the sovereign? First thing. So Maria came with the naivety of, economics, I can change these Bretton Woods institutes. There was no Bretton Woods institutes in Luero Triangle. Matia Kasaija knows what was in Luero Triangle. So he's able to know if the technicals are behaving this way, what is the position of the sovereign first, before he takes action. So for Kiwanuka, the technical people are this way, you are pushing it this way, and then you go. Because finally, it is the sovereign, it is the principle who will make a decision. So I think there was a bit of political naivety on her part. It is not about her competence, it's about naivety on her part. And she didn't know the circumstances under which she became a minister. You see the point? You must understand how you become what you are. If you lose that and you begin to think that you're going, politics, by the way, is not even in the church. You have to be very careful with the interests of priests. Before you begin to think, no, we are all believing in Jesus, and there are those who will claim more nearness to Jesus. Yes, than others.
Nick, let's just stay on the Minister of Finance, because that is critical. Going into the 2011 elections, this country was running two parallel currencies. Inflation hit double digit for the first time. Confessions have been coming out now of what happened then. You had the treasury broken and the money scattered on the street to win that election. You're going actually into a possibly more critical election. If we had succeeded in managing to keep Benjamin to discuss with us over his case, the talk in the Mbabazi camp is that already you're talking of more than 100 billion spent on trying to silence Mbabazi critics. I mean Mbabazi supporters, to make sure that the Soul Candidature project is succeeding. If you have a combination of Matia Kasaija, who's a friend, you have a combination of Keith Mhakadis, who's another friend, and the statements that came from...
By the way, Keith is a friend of Mbabazi. Huh? Keith and Mbabazi are friends.
They're friends.
So he's a friend of both. Yeah, he was in Rukunjiri.
Yes.
Yes, that's the part. He was one of the friends.
But he was working.
Yes.
For him, when he's at the ministry, he's working.
He's a friend of both.
Nick, when you have that combination, you have had the wailing and crying from the central bank governor in an election year. What do you think that portends for the country? Because the discussion is, will this economy weather the storm of what it went through? And you'd expect that Maria Chiwanuka would be the person who says, no. We made mistakes before I became minister here. I mean, going into 2011. If Maria Chiwanuka agrees with Mutevile, then the politics would have a problem. Now, in her removal, you think that Matia Kasaija is likely to be a little bit more compliant, given what Chris has been saying.
You've got to look beyond Matia Kasaija. Look at the key ministry, what you think are the corner ministries that can deliver this election for the head of state. You look at the Ministry of Finance, it's going to have an election budget, no doubt about it, both in terms of the budget, but also in terms of the management of the ministry. That's going to be a campaign, election running. You know, that's going to be the mode. But look around as well. You know, look at health. Health now, you have Chris is there. You know, Chris.
Not Obore.
Dr. Chris Beromos is there. Chris will deliver the Ministry of Health in a way that then would undermine Mbabazi, but also in a way that will then deliver the elections for the presidency. Look at, and an interesting ministry to look at, by the way, is the Ministry of Gender. You have Pius Bijirimana going there, and all of a sudden, when Pius goes there, billions of shillings is then sent to a ministry that either too was not, you know, well financed. So you go to look at the Ministry of Gender. You have people who have gone to gender now are seen as people who will deliver that election, but also because gender is now the principal operating center for the youth. This election is going to be about the youth, so gender becomes a critical point for delivering that youth.
And you think that Muruli Mukasa mobilizes the youth vote better than Karoro would have done?
I think that Muruli Mukasa brings us still more of a militant loyalist. For all intent and purposes, Karuru might be a yellow-wearing person, but she comes across as more technical,
more moderate.
More moderate. You know, although the statement she made about women giving sex to husband was in the extreme, but the truth is that she's more moderate. Muruli Mukasa is the typical loyalist who will do whatever it takes to deliver the elections for the president.
Gentlemen,
and you didn't want to have...
Can I cut you there? We take a break, and then when we come back, we'll be wrapping up this discussion. But especially looking at some of the guys who have arrived and how this shapes into the broader campaign, especially the networking between the new secretariat at the NRM and the people who are in cabinet. We'll be right back. taking the deepest look at the cabinet reshuffle announced earlier today. We had to make changes of programming to make sure that we accommodate this reshuffle, because our information, at least I know Nick knows, because Nick has very good sources of information, myself and Chris, our information was that that cabinet reshuffle that put a lady called Sarah Kajingo in trouble, we hosted her here some time back, had actually been written. The only problem was it leaked before it should have been released.
So Professor Massa missed out because you leaked the thing.
Professor Massa could have missed out because cabinet was leaked.
I think that
it delivers Tikodri. It brings Tikodri into cabinet. Tikodri is the guy who's been behind this Kira EV research at Makerere, and they brought him in as Minister of State for Higher Education, and especially focusing on the technical. Let's look at some of the people who appear like new arriving to cabinet. I will start with you, Chris. David Bahati. He was long in the queue. If there's someone who has actually been in the queue and now the queue has delivered him, it's David Bahati.
Yes, but just permit me to say something briefly on the money and election and the Museveni. I think, one, it's true. After 2016, if we're not going to handle the treasury well, the economy can burst. That one is known. But to rely again on the Mbabasi figures is also a falsehood. We can't be sure that these are not propagandist figures. That already the man has spent 500 billion.
They said 100, over 100 billion.
Over 100 billion. It could be propagandist figures. And then this overhyping of Museveni all the time. I think Museveni is more of an agent of World Bank and IMF than a Ugandan economist. So I don't want this man. We are making it look like without Museveni in the Bank of Uganda, this economy cannot run. But Museveni should be credited on the basis of what he has done. The economy has been suffering, and the same man there.
He has stabilized it for so many years.
Stabilized for what?
Succeeded in getting it running at 7% growth.
Do you know the number of parents who have not paid the school fees right now? Do you know the number? Which economy has he stabilized? So I think Museveni should be told, okay, drink your wine and whisk of 1 million a bottle, but don't be allowed to make like we are god of Ugandan economists. We actually have young economists around this country who are not getting opportunity because there is somebody who has been made a patriarch of the economy, which is false. I don't like to take that route of thinking. He is a human like any other person. But the critical thing in this, before you come to Bahati, I don't know why the Acholi sub-region has got a raw deal in this.
How do you mean?
Who has been dropped? Who has been dropped from Acholi sub-region? Onek and Okello Rema are the only ministers in the north, and the particularly Acholi sub-region. This is Onek, and that's that's the East Acholi.
From northeast.
Yeah, the northeast Acholi. Central Acholi, nothing. Where Amuru? Where not even a Todwong goes from Amuru.
So that is very dangerous. He's at the secretariat.
He's not a minister. We're talking about the cabinet, my brother. We're talking about the party secretariat here. So actually, is Amuru deal there. West Nile a bit is fine. And in the Lango, I don't see much.
No, Rebecca Otengo, the powers of this world,
as maintained.
Sam Angola, all from Lango.
But you know, when you talk about those people also, I like Sam Angola because he's free, but I like him more as a businessman than a politician. Otengo, Rebecca, yes, he has a heart for some service. Let's get to Bahati. To be honest, at a selfish point, I'm happy for Bahati. Because one of the happiness is what will put me at collision with Nick. Nick is my brother. We only depart on one point. Bahati has consistently stood for good family. And I like him for that. And Bahati is not also, he's not a politician by accident.
Don't say good family. I think he was the key promoter of the anti-homosexuality act.
No, he was the prime minister.
I was avoiding to say that.
Okay, Chris, come on.
And Bahati is also not one of these politicians who find politics as a last resort. You know, he was in the population secretariat.
Yes, and he was a businessman, very successful.
He can live without politics. So when such people keep going to politics and they grow in a career, I would like that people. Not people who have seen that have opened a law firm has collapsed. I have tried to marry a wife, she has run away. I have tried to plan things that have failed. Let me go and stand for elections. Those are the guys I don't want. So on that basis, I think appointment of Bahati is an appreciation that someone can live their own way of livelihood, get into politics, and able to craft a career in politics. So I am happy.
No, but just to make the point, and at a personal level, the Honorable David Bahati is actually, a fairly good friend. We have very, very cordial, conversations with him on a couple of issues. and you might be disappointed that we actually agree on a couple of things. The only point where we do not disagree is which
where
hand
you do not agree
for people with different sexual
I don't want us to go there.
but the point is this, that you have a country that has suffered the brunt of donor reaction to principally Bahati's actions in Parliament. He has got to then morph himself perhaps into a more agreeable minister to be able to confront the same donors that were so mad at him. Because if you're going to be the Minister of Planning, there's absolutely no doubt you're going to have to deal with the World Bank, you're going to have to deal with the IMF, you have to deal with all the donor partners that finance the budget of this country. So he's got to find a middle level. He's got to then, in my view, take a more diplomatic, drawn back approach to this issue. Because if he doesn't do that, that's going to be a put-off at the very, very, very beginning if he steps onto the door at the World Bank.
But
you possibly are staring in the face of a minister who might be issued a travel ban. But the Americans had lifted his travel ban to the US.
No, he's never been on a travel ban.
Yes, I mean they denied him a visa.
But he's
once.
going to plan for Uganda, not America. So I'm happy.
Yes, and when I did speak to him earlier today, he said we'll plan together. And you expect that, like I agree with Chris, that when you have a Bahati in the Ministry of Planning, he can sit with other people. And if you have Jachano Mach, you have Bahati, you have Matia Kasaija, you have a group of people that can sit and have a meeting of minds. And he can cut across, by the way, because as a person who is very financially astute, as Bahati is, I think Minister of Planning is a good fit for him, especially in his career growth, not political growth.
Not political growth. That's true. But just permit me ask you this. There are two things. But I don't know. I want President Museveni to explain it to me. What a crime Musa Echoro has committed, that he has been made perennially a Minister of State, with all the performance Echoro is doing, with all how Echoro is holding NRM for him in Iteso.
Echoro is a good cadre.
But
maybe the missing thing,
maybe the missing thing that he must be a Minister of State perennially.
Let me give you the opportunity to ask the President another question. Since you seem to be fighting for the people of Teso Sabrina.
No, I'm asking
one of the people who possibly was expecting a cabinet appointment is Captain Mike Mukula. Are you surprised he's missing on the list?
But I'm not surprised Mukula is missing on this, because he has been there. My brother there is a good man, but he's his own enemy. He knows how to get opportunities and he throw them away. That is the problem with Mike. He throws them away at one moment is very sober, another moment is in cloud nine. The other point is, what is the trouble for me? I don't mind Chrysostom Muyingo being a minister, but I frown at his being a minister and the Minister of Education.
Why?
Terrible conflict of interest.
But it's also bringing competencies of running an education.
You see, our education system is one of the areas I'm passionate about. Private schools are trying to every best to make business meaning education. Education different from money. And when you have a man with a chain of schools making top policy at Minister of Education, I found out that. What will an inspector of schools do? To whom will he write a report? So I expected the president to remove Muyingo from Minister of Education, put him anywhere if you want to be the politics. But to have a gentleman who is running his schools and opening more, and at the point today, Charles, we have so many issues affecting our education. The private schools are setting the pace than government schools. They want our children in schools at 4 a.m. They want cement, they want brooms, they want everything. And you don't expect Muyingo not to ask for cement for brooms. And if someone is to write alternative education policy that affects his interests, he will fight it.
Nick, if you comment on that, because that is critical.
Why do you have him there?
Results for USCE were released only on Friday. And Muyingo's success was as headmaster of that Namugongo. Very, very successful. Yeah. Then he's been very successful as an educationist who's been running these private schools, the Seta High School group. When he was initially appointed, very many people said, yes, you have found the right person. He has hands-on experience. Yep. And he's going to bring this experience into straightening out education. Now, Chris is extremely suspicious of him and disappointed that he has retained the ministry.
He should be a vice chancellor, Makerere, if he's good.
I actually don't agree with Chris on that, because, when Dr. Muyingo was appointed, I was in these very same studios and I was applauding his appointment. I still think that he should be in the Ministry of Education. My own sense is that he shouldn't be, he should be the real Minister of Education, because I think that Jessica Lupo doesn't understand how the education sector is run. A person like Muyingo understands the sector. He's been there long enough. the issue of conflict of interest can be managed through legislation and all kinds of things. But I think that he's in the right ministry.
Does he develop a policy that says children must be at school at 8 o'clock, not at 4 a.m.?
Don't give carry cement and brooms. The same thing, Peter Nyombi was an able minister of justice. Why were you fighting him?
He wasn't a minister of justice.
So it doesn't mean because you are an educationist.
He was attorney general.
Yes, it doesn't mean because you are an educationist you can perform well. But this is all about good intentions. It's not about qualification. Are you the appropriate person? Do you have the good intentions?
The point is, and you know, and the thing is that I hear you, Chris. The point is this: that you have, on the face of it, an apparent conflict of interest about somebody who is running a private school or a chain of private schools. But on the plus side is that you have somebody who understands that ministry inside out. The question of whether private schools people should be, it's actually beyond Muyingo as a person. It's a question of policy. It's a question of the law, which is made by not just the minister, but the entire cabinet, but also, you know...
Gentlemen, I'm afraid our time is out.
But just before you go out, I wanted to make a comment about my good sister Anita. It's really, you know, first of all, just to say, you know, congrats to her, but I do think that Anita needs to be a little bit more careful, because the picture she has crafted for herself is this, you know, non-thinking, you know, enthusiast who can do anything to get what she wants. But I think that the stage that she's been given is now going to be a test for her, whether she's going to be a national leader or indeed she's going to be the one singing around and dancing and then you're kneeling down. I think the challenge is now upon her, and more especially because the youth are the biggest part of this country. The way she's going to manage youth affairs in this country is going to determine whether it will make her or break her.
Okay. But you know, of course, Charles, you and me always talk about power brokers. In this cabinet, Museveni has not upset them. He's creating more. You know, Henry Kajura is just a demigod in the Bujoro. He's ever in part. For you think he's old, but Museveni knows why he should be there. Moses Ali.
No, some people have said that, some people have argued, maybe cynically, that President Museveni wants to keep these old men around cabinet so that he doesn't look out of place.
Not at all. Kajura, who is in Bunyoro, he's a kingmaker. Moses Ali. You don't just upset Moses Ali. He is Moses Ali. Now in Kisoro, he's going back to bring in Philemon Mateke. So if you are a modern day politician, understand that if you really have a clout, you have a chance not to be bothered by Museveni. You will always be what you want.
Our time is out. We need to get
fly away that kind of politicians.
I see Father Simon Lokodo has survived in spite of the calls for him to be...
But you a brilliant man.
In spite of the questions about...
Professor Maswa Charles, and I'm not happy. Now we don't have Mukula, we don't have Professor Maswa. And Echwero, we have made him permanently the Minister of State.
But you have JJ Odong as well. Permanently the
Minister of State.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we need to get out of here. I also see Aida Nantaba Erios has survived. People were questioning where she has been. They attached her salary the other day, but she is still in cabinet. Maybe just one last comment from either of you guys. Why has the position of Third Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for East African Affairs remained vacant? This is the position that was held by the late Eria Kategaya. Nick?
Well, I have absolutely no idea why he's found difficulties replacing the late Eria Kategaya. I do think that the calculations are about the East African integration process, and then you need to get somebody who understands that process. And
Shemba Gaine, people who know him say he's a guy who would have been a good fit for this.
Well, Shem had his own problems with the elections and what happened in Iyala. I think that he could have managed that process in a smarter way. I think that that in many ways has, in my view, made him appear weak and unable to control or drive the agenda at the East African level. I think that President Museveni is looking for a stronger person. He hasn't just found one. Maybe he can give it to Ziwa.
But we would have expected actually to come to Ziwa, but it has not come.
Okay. You think Donald Chibule has been disappointed? The youth minister caused a bit of...
but Kibule lives larger than life.
Now he's State Minister for Water?
Kibule lives larger than life. You know, if the Ministry of Youth is a dry ministry, but water, there's a lot of projects in that ministry. I think that's good for Chibule. Only that if he stops...
as a mobilization ministry.
If he stops this business of wanting to be right of way for every time, he doesn't drive on the right side of the road, I think he's maturing a bit. He will make a lot of money in Ministry of Water.
Our
But
time
there are
is
some
out.
ministers here, by the chance, you can't even remember their names. That's how disastrous being a minister now is.
Our time is out. We need to get out of here. So, my friends, of course, Chris Baryomunsi gets to the ministry, and that's a very good combination, in my view. A combination of Dr. Elioda Tumwesige as the Senior Minister for Health and Dr. Chris Baryomunsi. When you add them with technical people at that ministry like Francis Runumi, you have a very good team. Jenna Cheng, you have a very good team.
But the problem right now in the Ministry of Health is infant mortality. It's at 39. Me, I think it's high time.
39, what statistics are you using?
Yesterday I was hosting
54 and 49, I think.
something like that. I was
Yes.
hosting the minister in
42,
KFM.
42 and 40.
I think it is high time Mama
50
Janet
and
is
52.
removed from Karamoja and brought to health.
No,
So
that
that
is
means
the
how we
biggest
fight
problem.
this.
Gentlemen,
The biggest problem in Ministry of Health is that the Ministry of Health and our health budget is largely run by donors. Government is not investing in health.
yes. Our time is out, especially Dr. Baryomunsi comes in to deal with this crisis of typhoid in Kampala. Typhoid is caused by eating feces. What contaminated with feces?
Can you imagine?
Our time is out. We need to
So
get
I don't know, when are we getting appointed? Charles?
we
Maybe
need-
we have the information.
we need to get out of here.
When do we become ministers?
You begin your lobbying. Continue your lobbying. People have been on this show. Many of them have actually ended up in cabinet.
Cabinet.
So
Nicholas,
you need
Minister of
to
what?
work hard. Our
Minister of
time is
what?
out. We need to get out of here. I'll be watching very closely. Maybe just two things. One is the death of one of the most brilliant men who have written local literature, Reverend Father Kasaija. I think he must have been close to 100 years at the time he passed on, and wrote a lot of the hymn books in the Catholic Church, especially for that part of for Ruenzori. No. For Porto Diocese.
No,
and,
he has fought a good fight.
yes, but he was a very old man. And then, of course, I'll be watching closely. There will be a debate of inter-universities. A human rights debate organized by this FHRI at Busitama University next week.
Are you going there?
I
was in Mbali on Friday.
Mhm.
UCU Mbali, we had a very good debate there.
Okay.
Thanks to Dr. Mungoma. I was there with him.
And the announcement.
go to Bar.
And the announcement of
And I want
NTV
to
will
be
be
a
you.
government
After this,
minister. I
I'll
want
need
to be a
get out
government
there.
minister
Thank you
for
very much.
reforms.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Change
much.
how this government works.
You guys have spoiled the analysis of the cabinet for FM Radio in the morning because you've done the analysis now. Have a good night.